Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. Liadrin knelt before the sunwell, her head bowed in reverence, the glow of the sacred waters illuminating her golden hair. The warmth of the light coursed through her, a familiar and comforting presence that anchored her spirit amidst the chaos of the world. She had always found solace here at the heart of Quilthalas, where the blood elf's power flowed strongest. Yet today there was no comfort, only a growing sense of dread. A shadow loomed over her, both figurative and literal. Lady Liadrin, came the voice, somber and steady. Liadrin opened her eyes and slowly rose to her feet, turning to face Lord Thamar, the Regent Lord of Quilthalas. His face, usually a mask of calm determination, was creased with worry. The ever-present burden of leadership seemed to weigh heavier on him today. She greeted, her voice measured, though her heart was heavy. She already knew why he had come. The rumors had spread faster than wildfire across the land. The impossible was happening. "It's true then?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. He nodded. Liadrin, Sala, clenched at the name. Carol, Tatis, Sunstrider, their prince, their hope, once a hero to their people. But the Coralthaus who had returned was not the man they had once known. He was no longer the valiant leader who had fought to preserve the Blood Elf's future. No, he had fallen into darkness, and now he sought to reclaim his throne by any means necessary, even if it meant damning them all in the process. "Howdy," she whispered, almost to herself. How could he come back from such a fall? Lord Thamar's face tightened. He has made a pact with the Void. The Void, the very mention of it, sent a chill down her spine. It was a power older than time itself, a force of unimaginable darkness and corruption. And Quilthalas, the fallen prince, had allied himself with it, seeking to wield its power to reclaim the Blood Elves' destiny. But it was not their destiny he sought to reclaim, it was his own twisted ambition. "And now he seeks to bring the Void here, to Quilthalas," she asked, her voice trembling with the weight of what that meant. The Sunwell, the source of their magic and their very essence, would be corrupted. The people would be enslaved to the Void and its hunger. "Not just here, Lord," Thamar said, his voice low. "Everywhere." Liadrin took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had trained her whole life in the ways of the light, had fought for her people, had led them through the darkest of time. But this was a different kind of darkness, one that threatened to consume everything she had sworn to protect. "We cannot allow this," she said, her resolve hardening. "Quilthalas must be stopped, whatever the cost." Lord Thamar gave her a grim nod. "Our forces are rallying, but Quilthalas is gathering followers. Many still see him as the rightful ruler. They don't understand the danger he poses." "They will soon enough," Liadrin replied, "but we must be ready." The battle lines were being drawn, and the future of Quilthalas hung in the balance. For Liadrin, there was no hesitation. She would lead the charge, even if it meant facing the prince she had once revered. The days that followed were filled with preparations. Blood Elves loyal to Lord Thamar and Liadrin cause gathered at Silvermoon, readying for the inevitable conflict. But with every passing hour, more and more of their kind were seduced by Quilthalas' promises of power, of immortality. The Void's influence spread like a poison through the land, corrupting minds and hearts. Liadrin stood in the grand hall of Silvermoon, her gaze sweeping over the gathered troop. Paladins, warriors, mages, they all looked to her, their leader, for guidance. But she could see the doubt in their eyes. Quilthalas had been their prince, their hero, and now he was their enemy. It was a difficult truth for many to accept. "Listen to me," her voice strong as she addressed the assembled forces. "I know you are afraid. I know some of you still believe in Quilthalas, believe that he can lead us to greatness. But you must understand, this is not the Quilthalas you once knew. He has fallen, and now he seeks to drag us all into the Void with him." She paused, letting her words sink in. The power he offers is not salvation. It is damnation. The Void is a force of destruction, of corruption. If we allow it to take hold of our people, our land, the Sunwell itself, everything we have fought for, everything we are will be lost. Silence fell over the hall as her words echoed in the minds of those gathered. For a moment, she feared that doubt would prevail, that the seeds of Quilthalas' promises had already taken root too deeply. But then, one by one, the soldiers began to nod, their faces hardening with resolve. They understood the stakes. They understood that this was a fight for their very existence. Lord Thamar stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. We fight not just for ourselves, but for the future of Quel'Thalas, for our people, for the light Carolus must be stopped. Leodrin met his gaze and gave a firm nod. Together, they would lead their people into battle. Together, they would stand against the void. The sky above Silvermoon darkened as the first wave of Clonilda's forces approached. The prince himself had not yet revealed his presence, but his army, an amalgamation of blood, elves seduced by the void set's power, and shadowy creatures born from the darkness, was formidable. Leodrin stood at the front lines, her gleaming armor reflecting the last rays of the setting sun. She could feel the light within her pulsing, ready to strike down any who dared threaten her people. But the void Sav's presence weighed heavily in the air, a palpable sense of dread that threatened to choke the life from the battlefield before the fighting had even begun. Lord Thamar approached her, his expression grim. "See me. They're coming." She nodded, her eyes narrowing as she watched the approaching army. She ready. The two of them stood side by side, their forces arrayed behind them. They were outnumbered, but they had the advantage of the sunwell, sourdough power, and more importantly, they had the light. With a deep breath, Leodrin raised her sword high, calling upon the light, silent power. The golden glow emanating from her blade was a beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. "Hold the line," she shouted, "for Quell, Halita." The two armies clashed in a storm of magic and steel. Leodrin moved through the battlefield with precision and grace, her blade cutting down enemies with every strike. Each blow was accompanied by a burst of radiant light, purging the void Saint corruption from the land. But the void Sea's forces were relentless. For every enemy she struck down, two more seemed to rise in its place. The shadowy creatures summoned by Kaele's dark magic were unlike anything they had faced before, creatures of nightmare formed from the essence of the void itself. Leodrin fought on, her strength unwavering, but she could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on her. The light coursed through her, but even its warmth seemed distant in the face of the overwhelming darkness. And then amidst the chaos, she saw him. Color. The fallen prince stood atop a hill, his once golden hair now streaked with shadow, his eyes glowing with the void Sem power. He radiated darkness, his form twisted by the corruption that had consumed him. He was no longer the prince they had once known. He was a vessel for the void. Leodrin, his voice boomed across the battlefield, dripping with contempt. "You fight for a lost cause. The light is weak. It cannot save you, and it cannot save." Krell Hala. She narrowed her eyes, her grip tightening on her sword. "You were wrong, Carolace. The light is stronger than you know, and it will stop you." He laughed, the sound cold and empty. "The light cannot stop what is coming. The void is eternal, and soon it will consume everything. You cannot resist its power. You cannot resist me." Leodrin's heart pounded in her chest as she prepared for the final confrontation. The fate of her people, of the very world, hung in the balance. She knew what she had to do. As the battle raged on around her, she steeled herself for the sacrifice she would have to make. Leodrin gripped her sword, her breath steadying as she locked eyes with Kalsau. The battlefield was a cacophony of clashing metal, shouting voices, and the eerie hum of the void, Sarth's presence. But in this moment, all of that seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them now, the fallen prince and the paladin. Kainalthas stood tall, his once regal appearance now corrupted, twisted by the dark powers that coursed through him. The tendrils of void energy swirled around him, darkening the sky above them and casting long shadows across the ground. He smiled, a cruel, mocking expression. "Do you really think you can stop me, Leodrin? You cling to your light like it's some kind of shield, but it's still nothing compared to the power I now wield." Leodrin didn't answer immediately. She could feel the heat of the sunwell behind her, its energy pulsing in time with her heart. But she could also sense the creeping tendrils of the void reaching out, trying to consume it. If Kainalthas succeeded, the sunwell would be tainted forever, and Quel'Thalas would fall into darkness. She raised her sword, the blade shimmering with golden light. "I don't need to stop you, Kel. I just need to protect my people, and I will do that even if it costs me everything." Kainalthas laughed again, louder this time, as if her words were the most absurd thing he'd ever heard. Your people will come to me willingly, Leodrin. They will beg for the power I can give them. You, Lord, the others. You read nothing but relics of a dying age. Join me, and you want to have to watch your precious kingdom burn. Ledrin took a step forward, her expression hardening. It corrupts. It destroys. You don't want to save our people, you want to control them, but Quel'Thalas will never bend to the void. Quel'Thalas' smile faded, replaced by a cold, calculating look. You will die with it. Without warning, he raised his hands, and the air between them crackled with dark energy. The ground trembled as the void surged forward, a massive wave of blackness rushing toward Ledrin. She braced herself, channeling the light through her body, her armor glowing with the brilliance of the sunwell. The void collided with the light in a blinding explosion of energy. Ledrin felt the force of it slam into her, driving her back. But she stood her ground, refusing to yield. She pushed against the darkness, her sword glowing brighter as she focused all of her power into the fight. For a moment, it seemed like the void would consume her. But then, with a final surge of strength, Ledrin broke through. The wave of darkness shattered, and Quel'Thalas staggered back, his eyes wide with surprise. You can true when Ledrin said, her voice steady. Very not while the light still stands. Quel'Thalas near, his hands crackling with more dark energy. Than I will make sure the light doesn't stand. He launched himself at her, his form blurring with unnatural speed as he closed the distance between them. Ledrin barely had time to raise her sword before he was upon her, their blades clashing in a shower of spark. The force of his attack drove her back, but she quickly regained her footing, meeting him blow for blow. Their battle raged across the battlefield, the sound of their clashing swords echoing above the chaos. Around them, the forces of Quel'Thalas fought desperately to hold the line against the void-touched soldiers of Quel'Thalas, but it was clear that the longer this fight continued, the more ground they were losing. Ledrin knew she could not let this drag on. Quel'Thalas was too powerful, too dangerous. If she didn't stop him soon, everything they had fought for would be lost. With a cry of determination, she unleashed a burst of light, forcing Quel'Thalas to retreat. He snarled, his eyes glowing with fury as he summoned a swirling vortex of void energy. The air around them seemed to warp and twist as the power of the void consumed the space between them. You are finished, Ledrin, Quel'Thalas roared, his voice distorted by the void's influence. Straight, no one can stand against the void. But Ledrin wasn't finished. She could feel the light within her burning brighter than ever before. She raised her sword high, the blade shimmering with golden energy. She could feel the sunwell, Sanpao, flowing through her, but she also knew that this was the moment. This was where she would make her stand. And this was where she would make her sacrifice. I'm not afraid of the darkness. She said, her voice calm and clear. I embrace the light, and with it I will protect my people. With that, she drove her sword into the ground, channeling all of her power into the earth, radiant energy spreading out in a circle around her. The light grew brighter and brighter, until it enveloped her completely, a brilliant beacon of hope in the midst of the darkness. Quel'Thalas screamed, raising his hands to block the light, but it was too late. The light surged forward, consuming the void shell, pushing it back, purging it from the land. The darkness that had tainted the sunwell was washed away in an instant, and the forces of the void were shattered, but the cost was great. As the light faded, Ledrin fell to her knees, the strength draining from her body. She could feel the connection to the light slipping away, the power that had sustained her for so long, now leaving her. She'd given everything she had to stop Quel'Thalas, and now there was nothing left. Quel'Thalas lay on the ground, broken and defeated, his form flickering as the last remnants of the void sap power left him. He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and sorrow. You would throw everything away for them, at her harassed for these people. Ledrin looked down at him, her eyes soft with pity. Sarad and TT, throw anything away. Quel'Thalas, I saved them. I saved Quel'Thalas. That's what the light is for. Genau. Oz let out a bitter laugh, his body slowly disintegrating into dust. You may have won this battle, but the void is eternal. It will return, and next time, you won't be here to stop it. With those final words, Quel'Thalas dissolved into nothingness, leaving only silence in his wake. Ledrin remained on her knees, her body trembling with exhaustion. The battle was over, but the victory felt hollow. She had lost her connection to the light, the very thing that had defined her for so long. But even in the absence of its power, she felt a strange sense of peace. Lord Thamar approached her cautiously, his expression one of deep concern. Ledrin, Dre, he began, his voice hesitant. She looked up at him, a faint smile on her lips. Clarence, Dieu down, she said, quietly. The void is gone. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. Era, and what about you? Liadrin took a deep breath, closing her eyes as she let the silence of the battlefield wash over her. She was no longer the vessel of the light, no longer the paladin who had wielded its power, but she was still Liadrin, and she had saved her people. I'll be fine, she said, her voice steady. The light may be gone, but I am still here, and I'll find a way to protect Quelthalis even without it. Lord Lamar helped her to her feet, and together they looked out over the battlefield. The forces of Quelthalas were beginning to regroup, the remnants of Carlinael's army scattering into the shadow. The sunwell shone brightly in the distance, its light no longer tainted by the void. Liadrin knew that this was only the beginning. There would be more battles to come, more darkness to face, but for now they had won, and that was enough. As she stood there, looking out over the land she had sworn to protect, Liadrin felt a sense of quiet resolve settle over her. She may have lost the light, but she had not lost herself, and as long as she still stood, so too would Quelthala.